Now I know I'm late to the party, but I like to let dramas marinate a little before I get my licks in. So I just saw Idubbbz's big apology video where he talks about some of the regrets he has with his older content. He apologized for his use of gamer words and the content cops, and then I also watched a lot of different responses and reactions to it from all sorts of different viewpoints. I think there's a really interesting conversation here about edgy humor, handling fans, responsibility, change, and growth, and I feel like no one's quite hit the mark correctly on all this. So I'm just gonna pick on Moist Critical's response a bit as a baseline. There were things he said I agreed with, but also a lot that I disagreed with, and I'm gonna go over that first. Don't worry, I'll pick on Idubbbz too in a bit. Now before I saw it, I'll just say this first. I'm coming at this as someone who enjoys edgy humor. I like no-no words. As a teenager, you may as well have called me Tarantino with how these words were flowing out of me.
Nick! You ain't funny.
And still today, I like people who test the boundaries of what's acceptable. I like fully understanding what makes something wrong and harmful versus just a social faux pas or a social taboo. But I'm also not naive.
I don't think you made an entire generation of racists and bigots because you use slurs for shock humor. You just made edgy YouTube videos. You didn't ruin anybody's life. It doesn't strike me as something that was genuinely ruining people's lives hearing that kind of shit. Like, they're not hurtful, nor do I really think they're damaging.
I know where Charlie's coming from, but I disagree. I think Idubbbz probably did create some racists. So here's the thing about Charlie. He's old. He's really old for this space. To be fair, so am I, which is why I can kind of relate. During the peak of Content Cop, I was already a man. I was an adult, I was in university, I already had a strong sense of self. I could consume content from a charismatic figure like Idubbbz, and take everything with a grain of salt, with some perspective. Let's face it, a lot of Idubbbz fans at the time were kids, or, you know, neat shut-ins without much life experience. Now, I'm not a fan of completely treating young people as though they're all brain-dead, impressionable morons, but generally, the younger you are, the dumber you are, okay?
Ice cream so good. Gang gang.
So when you use slurs, which I think at times with certain jokes can be okay.
Oh, it's a single piece of paper that says you look back and say, ooh, that was pretty gay of me.
But when you use it that flagrantly, and worse, you make really shoddy justifications for millions of impressionable people out there, a decent portion of whom wouldn't understand how Idubbbz was using those words, you know, the intent behind it. And because of that, I think it can lead some of them to more easily accept and coalesce to even more extreme types of humor. And then all of a sudden, months down the line, some of them might be spamming crazy shit on the poll board, and they're not really jokes anymore.
The boy is literally a Nazi.
You know, I kind of buy into the whole meme that doing something ironically can be a gateway to doing it unironically unless you keep yourself in check. That's not to say you can never do edgy content, but Idubbbz never really had a leash on his audience. He never made it clear where he was coming from.
I feel like this whole video could have just been summed up very easily like, hey guys, it was fucking 2016.
What a fucking
It was 2016 edginess in all of its glory. That was entirely the brand.
I mean, just because it was normal for the time doesn't mean you can't feel bad about it later. But also, the fact it was so normal was kind of a problem in that era. People may not know this or may have forgotten by now, but at the time, there were a lot of popular white nationalists on YouTube. And someone like Idubbbz and his humor didn't just act as a stepping stone to these people, he also gave them some cover, some legitimacy. I mean, damn, here's Nick Fuentes talking about using humor as a way to ingratiate people to his ideology.
Irony is so important for giving a lot of like cover and plausible deniability for our views. I can't explain this in a very explicit way. You're going to have to just sort of get what I'm saying here. You need a little bit of maneuverability that irony gives you.
I mean, this stuff infected a lot of people. You had JonTron coming out with some wild shit.
I'm just talking about the demographic shift. Whites are expected to just lay down and take it. I do think, race influences culture. I think it does.
So Charlie's saying, well, it was normal for the time, isn't the saving grace he thinks it is. If anything, that was the time for Idubbbz to be extra careful. Sure, Idubbbz didn't personally walk up to a fan, cast a spell on them, and then turn them into David Duke. But as part of a broader culture, yeah, he probably had some negative impacts, which you can get a sense of by just reading the comments in your own video. Charlie just seemed to ignore these and then later double down. I mean, there are a lot of anecdotes here from young people talking about how this stuff made them a more toxic person, and from minority kids talking about how they were bullied in school. And those kids would basically use Idubbbz's arguments and point to him as a figure of authority as to why it was okay. I mean, shit, Idubbbz's own experience of fans coming up to him just saying slurs out in public just further substantiates that. And this really struck home to me how out of touch Charlie is. He almost completely ignored Idubbbz's anecdotes of meeting those real life fans. I don't think most people just walk away from multiple bad encounters like that and think, yeah, what I'm doing is completely fine, I'll just keep doing it. Especially the one of that one person who said, I know you don't like trans people, but can I have a picture?
This particular fan came up to me and said, I know you probably don't like transgender people, but can I, get a picture? that smacked me in the face.
You don't want innocent people to feel badly about themselves because of you. If you're not a hateful person, you wouldn't want to give out those vibes. As an influencer, I don't know how Charlie didn't track on with this.
None of your videos came from a place of hate. The point of his content wasn't to be hateful. He really was just trying to entertain.
But he's not apologizing for his intentions, he's apologizing for his effect on people.
As an adult gamer bro making millions of dollars by spamming videos online for over a decade from his cave, Charlie might have been a little bit insulated from how this kind of thing affected other people.
Nah, why did I sound so condescending and catty saying this? I'm sorry, I guess there's no other way to put it though. But hey, at least he didn't have a boring fence-sitting opinion like in 90% of his videos.
That's not to say he can't have an opinion or that he has to be wrong. I'm just guessing that he's probably a little bit blind on this.
Hey, that's pretty good.
So what I think some Idubbbz haters struggle with now regarding his apology and stuff
Is he's now so soy.
like, for example, he goes on this podcast with this lady, and some of the parts here are okay, but there's this section where the host chastises Ian for apologizing to Tana more personally and not a black creator like Jinx.
The way I read it was, okay, he's been in trouble for using this kind of language and racial slurs and all of this, but the only person he individualizes is a white woman. And it would lead you to believe that no black person was individually picked on or targeted, and that's not the case. Why is the same not grace shown to a person like Jinx when you decide to make a content cop about them and to not allow this other black creator to exist? And in the same way, you call these black people, you call black people themselves the N-word, but they aren't singled out in the apology, and I wonder why it is that that's the case.
Firstly, I don't think he called Jinx the N-word. And he did actually specifically apologize to black people.
I'm also sorry to all the black viewers and minority groups who had to put up with that video and put up with, you know, the phrases.
Look, I'm not saying he's wrong here, but come on, I'm sorry, black people. It just sounds goofy, right?
It's giving me David Guetta ends racism vibes.
In honor of George Floyd, so shout out to his family. I have a dream.
There's an obvious reason why he singled out Tana, and race has nothing to do with it. Her content cop was wild. That was the one I always felt kind of weird about. Even watching it for the first time, I didn't like it. Because usually there was some proportionality to the content cops, right? Jinx, who did lazy react content, or those fast food channels he picked on, they didn't get it nearly as bad as Keemstar and Leafy did. Look, Keem and Leafy were pretty consistently shitty people. Like, that was their business model, was to be a shitty person. So being harsh towards them felt kind of appropriate. But Tana did get it bad. And what was like her major transgression? It was that she didn't like that Idubbbz said slurs even though she used to say them in the past, basically. Okay, there was a bit more to it, but listen, she just wasn't that bad. But for all that, she got a public execution.
Tana, you are dumb. But you couldn't do that because you're the most predictable human being on the planet. This is the epitome of being a basic bitch. Eating your own shit. I think eating your own shit is bad. You sure are one hateful bitch. Saying it.
Tana's content cop was almost twice as long as Jinx's. She was still a teenager, and he confronted her in person. Yeah, he was particularly harsh in this, and I understand why he felt worst about it. But Idubbbz doesn't defend himself in any of these ways. He just takes this lady's silly point about Jinx and eats it like a slug.
Yeah.
Jinx deserves his own apology, and I'm open to personally talking to Jinx.
No, he doesn't. Screw him. He was stealing content, and your criticism was fair and proportional.
Jinx making reaction content, like, you know, nowadays that's like, it's commonplace, right? So
Yeah.
That's not a good thing.
you know, the content I was making, it was just, it was cheap, I think, in kind of the same way that some people can view reaction content as cheap. So I think in a lot of ways I am guilty of what I was criticizing Jinx for.
No, stop. Your content was on another stratosphere to bullshit react content. Like, I know you're on your empathy arc, but that doesn't mean you have to lose a spine.
He goes way too far with some of the self-flagellation.
I was morally grandstanding and acting as if I am any better than any of these people that I was making content cop videos on.
I mean, on the whole, you were better than most of them. These were not very good people.
And I'm not. I'm a human. I'm a real human who makes mistakes. And, you know, I make a different set of mistakes than the people I was making videos on.
Being flawed doesn't preclude you from criticizing others. There are degrees to this. You were never as bad as someone like Keemstar. Pol Pot made a different set of mistakes to you as well. But if you made a content cop on him, you could grandstand a little bit, you know?
I'm sorry to everyone that I made content cop videos on. I can recognize that you did not deserve the hate and harassment that I sent your way.
Some of them did deserve it. You don't need to chuck the criticism baby out with the slurs bathwater.
Overall, I just think of Idubbbz's analysis of himself was a bit more pointed, a bit more targeted and nuanced, rather than be like, oh yeah, I was mean, I said bad words, and that's bad. Now I am become empath.
I think only in these past couple of years have I gained the ability empathy. I just like can't help myself but like feel for other people's pain and suffering now.
Bro, I don't know. I feel like this could have landed a lot better.
For a lot of his fans, it just feels a bit like, well, how did this man get here? Right now, like the really edgy portion of his fans or his former fans, they're just like, man, screw this lame loser. And I think there was a potentially healthy way for him to keep a lot of them on board and nudge them closer to where he is, rather than bring out the whip, hit them, and then yourself.
And now they're lost forever. They're flocking to people like Sam Hyde.
In the end, I might disagree with aspects of what he says or how he says it, but if he's sincerely speaking his truth, which I think he is, I can't criticize it too much. And overall, like big picture, I think what he's done is cool. I just think there was a much more ideal way to get there, you know? But yeah, that's about it. Like and stuff, check out my second channel. See ya.
Cut my life into pieces. This is my